thank you, Dr. Dunn. We are now going to answer some questions from our audience. So please, if you have any questions, go ahead and type those in the question box and press send. And again, for those seeking pesticide credits, as a reminder, please don't forget to sign out if you want those credits. To do that, just go to the audience chat box, type your first name, last name, and all the states for which you are seeking credits. And with that in mind, let's go ahead and take the first question.
So I know that presentation was pretty generic, food safety and good agricultural practices. So as we wait for anyone to put in questions, if there are any, I just want you to be aware that if you need produce safety training in Georgia, we obviously have the Produce Safety Alliance grower trainings that the GEDA hosts, and I'm a part of those, and we can always help you get hooked up with those. I'm not sure what our training schedule is going to be for the spring quite yet with COVID, just because it's hard enough to have a 2-day HACCP class or 2.5-day preventive controls class in person, but it's even, I guess, more daunting to think about doing one online for that period of time. But you are more than welcome to send me an email or contact your extension agent if you're in Georgia, or if you're in a surrounding state. We work closely with most of the other states and their extension programs that we can kind of get you hooked up with your food safety person in those areas if there's any training that you need.
I don't see any questions yet, but just with that in mind, what if a grower is seeking just some general assistance on creating a food safety plan? Like, what are the steps or levels that someone can go in seeking some help with food safety?
If you're just a total food safety novice and you're a grower or a packer, I would probably start with the Produce Safety Alliance grower training. Most of the states, those are run through either their university extension or, as I said, in Georgia, the Department of Ag, but I'm a part of those. Yes, there are requirements for who falls under those. So typically people are familiar with, if you make more than $25,000 a year, and if you, make a certain amount or sell to certain people, you fall under that. And so I think that scares away a lot of people, but really most of the states subsidize it. It's usually a pretty inexpensive course right now. I think in most places it ranges from about $15 to $25. It probably won't always be that inexpensive, but it really is a good 8-hour crash course on the big things that you'll need in a food safety plan. So, it has really strict water requirements that everyone kind of gets scared about. So maybe you don't have to follow those, even if you don't fall under the produce safety rule, but those are really good guidelines that you can kind of start aspiring to, or at least have a general idea of, all right, I don't fit that threshold, but, what do I start looking for? Should I start testing my water? Why am I testing it? What am I looking for? And, not to hate on water testing, because it also kind of goes into best practices for if you're using biological soil amendments, if you have workers, everyone has workers. So how are you keeping up with their training? What are some of the training requirements? That's a really good place to start, just because those trainings are pretty widespread. Everyone offers them. If you have an opportunity to take a GAPS class, I'd encourage you to do that too. And I see there's a question, Ashley, what?
Yeah, so speaking of water testing, we have one here. So BSMA requires generic E. coli monitoring for water quality, but do you monitor surface waters in Georgia for salmonella?
That is a very good question. So you can, but I would not spend my money on it. The reason you don't want to be monitoring for salmonella is it's a much more expensive test than that E. coli test. And I have my dog slurping in the background, who's reminding me it's feeding time, so sorry about that. But if you did a salmonella test, all that would tell you is whether or not there's salmonella in your water, but it wouldn't tell you whether or not there's pathogenic E. coli or cyclospora or norovirus, or all sorts of other pathogens in your water as well. So don't waste your time or your money with specific pathogen tests. We do the generic E. coli because we find generic E. coli in the intestinal tracts of warm-blooded animals. We find our pathogens typically in the intestinal tracts of warm-blooded animals. So we kind of assume that if there's a large amount of this generic E. coli, there's the potential for there being salmonella or some of these other things. But if you start getting into specific pathogen testing in your surface water sources, you would spend a ton of money testing every single one.
Excellent. Thank you. That was really helpful.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Well, you've got me, because I'll never answer another question after this. I think my email was in that last slide. If you're not in Georgia, which I know the vast majority of people attending this conference aren't necessarily in Georgia because it's a regional conference, but you're not sure who to reach out to for food safety questions, easy ones I'm happy answering, but I'm also happy getting you in touch with the food safety person in your own state.
And never underestimate the importance of having your local county extension contact as well. We're fairly good at getting you to the right person if we don't have the answer. So don't hesitate to use that local resource as well. I'm not seeing any more questions. Last call if you've got one, and we'll let Laurel go and thank her for her expertise and time today. All right, well, if you have any last minute questions or something comes up now that we're done, just send Laurel an email, and thank you so much for attending the conference.
Thank you.